Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, so a lot of this video is going to be time-lapsed to try to cut it down. It's already long enough as it is. So just briefly, this is what's called Davy board. And this is what I'm going to use to make my master template from. So anyway, while I'm doing this, I know that this will be the first time I've ever done dungeon tiles of any kind. And there's so many of them out there already, these videos about how to do them. It's kind of one of those things like, why am I doing it now? And, I spend about, I don't know, maybe about a week or actually maybe most of December trying to design some aspects that I wanted to have. Now, real quick, that line that I put there, that's 9/16. This is a template for the regular 1/2 inch foam XPS that you get from Home Depot, the pink stuff. It says 1/2 inch, but it's actually 9/16. So that 9/16 is actually that list, and then the squares themselves are 1 inch wide. So anyway, I'll have all that in the templates. So I started doing this because I had some concepts of tabletop storytelling that I just couldn't find designs already out there that I had addressed. And one of the things was the fog of war and a few other things like that. So I was trying to figure out a way if it was even possible to do it on a tabletop kind of system. And then once I think I figured out how to do it, which was pretty simple for the most part, then I decided that I needed to create some sort of uniformity, something that allowed one simple design to be able to be useful in a lot of different aspects. So I had a couple different things. As I say, I searched the internet to find the design that I wanted, thinking that it was already out there. And it wasn't, not for what I wanted. So I needed to go and sort of, design it from scratch. So a couple things I knew I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that the price point stayed as cheap as possible. That's always a given. And I wanted to be able to make it to where it was relatively easy for everyone to make, no matter what, including people in middle school. Let's say this is a big thing for schools and whatnot, because, they have a very limited budget and they have, limited storage space and everything like that. So I wanted to make sure that if I could meet the needs of the D&D clubs and schools, I can definitely meet the needs of everyone else because of that. So I wanted to make sure that, again, it was cheap, and I wanted to make sure that it was relatively consistent, so that way you can pre-make the room, cover it up, and you'll be good to go until you start playing, and none of the players will be the wiser until they get, into the room. Now, I also wanted to make sure that you just couldn't look at a room, because, these things would be pre-built rooms. So if you played them more than once, then you could probably identify just how the doors were or where they were, or if there was some sort of section of it, So I wanted to make sure that you could reuse different designs. Well, excuse me. You can reuse the same design and nobody would actually know. You can use the same room over and over, and nobody would actually just identify what that room was just by sitting down at the table. So on top of it needing to be inexpensive to make per room, it also needed to be customizable. It had to have sort of a basic shape to it, so that way you only had to cut out a few different pieces, and make multiple copies of those few pieces, but you had to be able to make it pretty simply. It had to have the ability to be modified later, so doors could be moved around and things along those lines. And again, it had to be simple to do. And it took a while for me to get all of the things that I wanted, and that's why I did this design. That's why I'm doing this now. It's because I think I finally got there, and I'll need your all's help to help improve it along the way. But I think I got it, When I first started this, I wasn't quite sure what rooms I was going to be doing for this first video. So I just kind of made one large piece and then just, divided it into 1 inch squares. And so now I'm kind of making little dots where I'm thinking about what's going to happen. As I say, this is just this 1/2 inch XPS foam. I don't, this wasn't really textured at all. I do this stuff just pretty quickly, and because I get impatient while I'm just drawing a bunch of lines, you can see sort of where my pencil just kind of went off and had a mind of its own. But I kind of like just having a bunch of extra squares, because instead of doing them independently, these big pieces just kind of, I don't know, it kind of helped. But part of my design, it does not require you consuming one of the tiles to put a wall up. And that was one of the big things too, that I found, that all of these 3D printed ones and all of the foam ones, not every one of them, but most of the ones that I found, they all put the walls right there on the edge of the thing, and then you end up losing one of the squares. I just don't understand that. I just, maybe there's something that makes sense, because I do mostly design work and things like that, so I haven't done a lot of tabletop playing in a while, but but maybe it's important to some people. But for me, I just didn't understand it. I'd rather have the walls just become the boundaries, and then make all of the available space for the rooms you create for the rooms. You might actually occupy them with furniture or something like that, but I don't need a wall taking up 1/2 inch, and then when I put a bookshelf down, it's actually taking up another part of that same the next square over. So as I say, I don't know why that's a major design element, but I didn't want it, and so that's why you can cut, for my design, you can cut the floors out. So if you have a 7x7 room, you can cut a 7x7 square. Well, that's that. Okay, so here's a 5x5 square. Also, because of the length of this video, I'm going to put in the description chapter links, so that way you can kind of go back and forth if you need to. I know that I'm trying to make this a little shorter as I'm editing this right now, but I think it's important to have me sort of talking everyone through as much as I can. So while I'm just figuring out some stuff, actually let me touch base on this real quick. So what I'm doing is, one of my rules is that you can't have an opening, or where a door would be or anything else would be, on any peak. So I classify the teeth by peaks and valleys. So well, it should be self-explanatory, but the peak is on the 2.5 inch edge, and then the valley is the 9/16 down. So the rule of thumb for my designs are, don't ever put an opening on a peak. It's always on a valley. So see what I'm doing there is, I was trying to make sure where I wanted the doors to be. Now you can do a very standard kind of thing where essentially on this 5x5 you have just 4 openings in the middle of everyone, but sometimes you might not want that. So I've also designed it in a way that you have 2 sides that are the same, and then when you go to their counter, their 90-degree counter, those 2 walls are a little different. This way you can move it around if you want to. Now again, these designs use basic forms to create your rooms, and so I don't have, this is not like saying, when you have a 5x5 room, do not make do not do your own thing. The whole point of this is to create a commonality, so this way you can do a whole lot more with the rooms, and you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you only have to have one template to do it all. So this is kind of where I'm coming from with the stuff. So if you'll notice, you're like, well, okay, well, why are you doing all this when you can, these could be one piece, or where's the corners coming from? The reason I'm doing it this way is, yes, it takes a little bit more time to set it up, and it does kind of potentially, if you have a short attention span like I do, you can sometimes not cut foam straight, and then you'll end up getting different little angles on the stuff. So you want to kind of make sure that all the walls are pointing straight up. So for me, that I ended up doing it this way because I can check each wall as I'm doing it, And yes, it takes a little bit more time, but in the end, you never have to do it again. So, it's, I don't know, spend a little extra time as far as I'm concerned and get it, and make it nice. But I recommend making 2 or 3 before you ever get involved in really designing the insides of the rooms, like really detailing them and painting a new floor. I say that only because you got to get kind of used to the system, and then once you get used to it, it's not a big deal. I, for one, made after I designed them, I thought I had a pretty good handle on it all, but inevitably, I made 2 or 3 rooms, and they were all over the place. Trying to figure out, I did not want to use hot glue. I don't like hot glue, but because it's thick, it leaves an extra buildup, so that can mess up some of your measurements. I wanted to make it out of just white glue, but for the sake of the videos, the white glue was taking way too long to glue together, and it was becoming kind of problematic because I wanted to slide all over the place. So hot glue is probably the way to go for most of it. So I have one little, so that 1x3 there, I'm using it as a guide for where the doors are going to go, because all of my doors have a slide into the walls, so there's no there's no extra space, right? It's all going to kind of fit together. So I'm just using this as a means, so that way I don't, when the things go in there, I'm not putting these walls too close together and potentially screwing me up when I do my door sections. So that's the reason for this. So a little bit later in this video, I'm going to have my walls textured, just a generic sort of castle texture. For this, I just, I'm making about 3 or 4 rooms in this video, so it was becoming a little time consuming. It was already taking me so long just to make the designs and to do all the tests. I didn't want to spend any more time than I needed to just to get this video out. I think at the moment of doing this audio, I'm almost a month from my last video, which is, I haven't done that in a long time. So I like to try to make videos, more if I can, at least 2 a month. But this design, it took a little while. So see, that actually, it seems like it's a lot, but it's actually pretty simple. So then once you get this, you'll be able to do quite a few different things with it. Now you can do now I've already switched over, but you can see like that room right there in the corner. So I have little corner pieces. I'm going to get into that a little bit more detail towards the end of the video, but you don't actually have to put the corner pieces there. They're just good for extra support, but you don't actually need them. And I have a couple different things that I like to make them a little fancier, so the rooms on the outside look a little bit better. Now, one thing I can say actually about doing cutting the foam pieces in one big strip and then cutting out what you need for the individual wall sections, one nice thing I really like about that is that you can texture the whole wall on both sides at the same time. And then that way, after you've done the texture, boom, you already have it. You can even paint them ahead of time if you wanted to. This way you don't have to get involved with having a bunch of extra pieces running around. You can just have all this stuff done ahead of time, and then you can just put it all together. So, and again, this is another thing for school. You can take one day just to make all of the pieces and paint them and texture them and everything like that, and then go back with an allotted amount, and then sort of make your own designs from there and turn it into an actual project. So because this room here, this little 3x3, has offset walls, I decided that this is almost like a corridor or like a closet maybe. So this is a 3x7 room here, and this is one of my this is actually where the original design sort of came from, this happening. The idea is that I wanted to have a room, but then one time I wanted you to maybe have a door, and then another time I wanted you to have an alcove, where there was a statue there or a trap. And to do that, I had to make a hallway of doors. And now you can probably And in maybe cases, I might even recommend making the hallway a little longer, so this way you don't have the doors or the openings, one off of each other. You can do give them like 2 inches in between. This makes it a little bit easier when you're adding extra stuff to it, and you can put extra doors and such. But again, it's pretty universal for the most part. The doors are the only things that are a little wider that would cause problems, but the inserts, they're you can have the doors on top of each other. Well, you can have the inserts on top of each other. Sorry, I'm recording this kind of late. I shouldn't be doing that this so late, but I've been procrastinating a lot. I don't know. I think it's just the temperatures right now. It's about 5 degrees where I am, and then the next day it's 40, and then the next day it's 5 degrees again, and it's really throwing my mood off quite a bit. And I have to admit, as I was making this, I had what I thought was a really good idea, and again, it was everybody can use it, but I was still kind of focused on the school aspect of things. So because of that, I was really excited in the fact that, okay, schools probably do a lot of sort of, the 1-page dungeon crawl kind of situations, where they can do a lot with those, with story and everything else, and you don't have to have a lot of resources. So I was really excited about this, but about halfway into the design, I started to worry about, does anybody even care about this? There's so much stuff out there, even though I think I've added some elements to the whole process, I don't know. I was a little worried. So I kind of kept going back and forth on, whether this is something, because this is not like a super pretty project, right? This is not one of those things you can just watch for hours of literally watching static grass kind of stick to the floor. This is one of those things that you have to have a purpose for it. And so I was always a little worried about, whether if this video was going to be received well or not. But I decided that it was important to have it. So this is actually the door, right? This is the door insert. And I know it seems a little complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. So you just have some short pieces and then 2 long pieces, right? And then you have that floor piece right there. That obviously is not a full grid all the way around it, but I actually cut it from that master piece, which was 3 by 4, and so then I cut it from there. The idea behind this, excuse me, my voice is a little grovelly today. The idea behind this is that I wanted you to be able to have a door that you can change, right? And it not just be a door that you literally have to 3D print and then have to go back through and print another one. The idea is that there's an insert, so you can have bars. You can have a door that's been blocked. You can have it open, right? Instead of the door, it's a trap. So when you walk through it, it sets off a trap. I wanted the ability to have flexibility in what you were doing with your design. So this way you could just have, and oh, by the way, that door I just drew, or that door I had drawn on, is just 3/16 foam core, just regular foam board that I think from Elmer's or something like that. I have another version where you can do in 1/8, where it's the Davy board, but I think Davy board is not really available to everyone, and it can get expensive. So I think that even though that foam core is expensive, that Elmer stuff, I figured it's probably a little bit easier to get for most people. So that's why I'm sticking to the 3/16 mark. So, as I say, I don't need to go through this step by step, but I wanted to make sure the video is here in real time when I'm doing this stuff, so that way you can kind of see how to put it together. Now, in my templates or my instruction booklet or whatever you want to call it, I'm going to do my step by step, on how to put them together to make it easy. But here's the video just in case you need a visual reference as well. But see, that is the door unit. So you can put that little door slot in there. and you can obviously print them and then put them on the foam core or whatever. But so that's the foam slot, and then you can put a cover over top of the door, so that way people just don't know, if it's a door or if it's a trap, or or if it's available for anybody to do it. So the whole fog of war process still works. So I hope you can see right now from just this little bit that you can move. And I know the pink foam kind of doesn't really sell it as a dungeon, but you can kind of see how you can mix and match. So you can have a standard set of these rooms just in storage. And again, for schools, they don't have a lot of storage, and actually none of us have a lot of storage. So we can't keep redoing this stuff all the time and having these very specific ones. But the idea is that you can play around with this and do a lot with the rooms. So this insert is actually an alcove. So the idea behind this is, the statue could be there. There could be a trap there. There could be a treasure chest sitting off in the inside of it. It could be anything, really. It could be a hole in the wall that leads to somewhere else. But the idea is that I did not want you to know what it was from the outside looking at the room. So every insert had to have the same pattern, which means that all the alcoves and all the miscellaneous things actually protrude a little bit. So just like all the rest of the door inserts, there is the floor insert that's going to go in there, and so that way it'll fit snugly into the the room, whatever you have set up. And because the overall size is I think it's 1.5 inches. I think it's 1.5. Might be 2 inches actually. Whatever it is, it's the ability to fit it in and be able to have another one two spaces over. So this little piece on the back there, it's to help support the thing, making it so it won't fall over. It's also something to help pick it up, and essentially that's going to be the overall design. It's actually pretty simple. As I say, once you get these pieces cut, it's just simple assembly. I'd probably make about 10 or 15 of those, maybe even a little bit more. They'll probably be the thing you have the most of. Now, this is the lid for that little 3x3 room. Now, it could be cheaper to do it in cardboard, right? But I don't have access to like recycled cardboard, and I don't really order a lot online. So I really don't have a lot of availability to cardboard. And so the only way I can get it is by buying it like at Home Depot. And that becomes actually more expensive per square inch than the foam does. So the reason I'm showing you and I'm designing all this to having that same thickness lid is because it was cheaper at the end of the day. By like, 10 or 15 cents, which is not a lot, but if you're making a bunch of them, it can add up. So I'm kind of going, the basics on this whole thing, right? So you got to remember that the outside edge is the thickness of the walls. So that's 9/16. So you got to go in 9/16, then make the size of the room, which would be 3x3, and then make another 9/16 for the other side of the wall. So you got to make that square, and then that will give you the ability to line it all up. Now I'm just making the squares so that way I can illustrate what this actually looks like. But what you want to do is once you get this basic pattern drawn out and cut out for your room, then you go back and just make sure what spaces need to be cut out and what spaces need to stay for the slots to fit into. And the way it works is that all the outlets, all the stuff, always have their slots. So this way the inserts will fit snugly underneath of them, so that way your lids will still fit and not expose any of the room. So I'm just kind of marking in hindsight. the four marks made no sense. I shouldn't have done that. I should have made a line or something like I did here, but I didn't. But as I say, just go slow. It's not a race. So this will give you the ability to kind of play around and do some extra things. Now, for the lids, I do recommend once you get the basic size cut, and once you figure out, maybe make sure that you got all the slots correct, I do recommend going back and trimming off more of the slots. So it's really more like 7/8 of an inch instead of 1 inch. And the reason is that you don't want to basically have the lids so secure that when you're in the middle of gameplay, you go to take off the lid and it pulls the room and everything else with it. So that would not be a good thing. So you definitely want to make sure that you make the rooms a little bit, let's say, smaller than 1 inch. But I don't do that until afterwards, because you never know how, like when you glue the rooms together, I glue them together pretty fast. So you might end up actually having one space that's maybe a little too, like below 1 inch, and some that's actually more than 1 inch. So I find it better to go ahead and just make the standard and then customize it to fit the piece that I've made, afterwards. This way I don't have to go back and redo anything. And as many times as I've actually done this, I've had to go back and do quite a few. The reason that and forgive me, I keep saying I don't know why, but the reason that I'm doing all of this by hand is, yes, I could use the whole point of making the template out of Davy board is so I can just put the Davy board over top of the foam and use a electric wire cutter and get it done quickly. But not everyone will have a wire cutter available, which is why I am doing it by hand. It's not a big deal, but I just want everybody to see the sort of how, if it's time consuming. Now see how tight that is right there? You might say you want to go through, because I have a habit, a bad habit, when I have to cut stuff by hand. I've been using smaller blades, and it has been the death of me. The blade like I'm using now, don't ever use these blades. They're too small, and they bend and they curve too easily, and I am constantly going back and having to reef and to fix walls because I've cut the foam, and it's just off angle, just enough to make everything screw up. So after this video, you will not see me using these little bitty things anymore. I like them because you can kind of get into the foam a little bit easier, but it's not practical for cutting the big pieces. So see, that's still too tight. So you need to make it a little looser than that, because you'll have to use both hands to pull the thing up. This is sort of the main room. The idea is I'm putting the circles where I want the doors to be. So you can honestly put the doors wherever you want to. But again, remember, if you can keep kind of a consistency based on my original designs that I'll include, it will at least give you the ability to, again, hide what your rooms really are until they're revealed. And, you don't have to do it, of course. You can put the rooms and the doors wherever you want to, but I'm kind of doing the real display. So I've made that castle texture really simple. I've made like a little bit of the, sort of ground, as it were, for the, the stone stuff. So I decided to go ahead and first start painting this with that linen color. And after I did it, I decided against it because dungeons shouldn't be primed with a lighter color. Dungeons are, below ground, so they're never, no matter what the stone is, the stone's going to look really old and not have a lighter tone to it. So I ended up doing all of this in this color. Sadly enough, I think I ended up doing it 2 coats, and it was kind of useless, and I went back and actually painted it all gray later. I'm not even sure that I actually show all of it in the video, but I did. I had to go back and paint it gray because I did like 3 or 4 different layers, like I would do something else to kind of make it look like different stones and whatnot. But I started thinking about dungeons, and typically, the walls would probably be made from the stones that were excavated to make the dungeons in the first place. So, they're all probably pretty uniform in color. But again, there's a whole point of building something that's realistic and the whole point of building something that's for aesthetics. So it's a little bit of both. And you'll notice that I did not paint the outside. I figured I would just hold off on that one so I didn't have to wait for everything to dry, and I can just keep going. So I'm using these, what do you call them? These metal blocks. I forget what you call them right now, but their name escapes me at the moment. Something simple. 1, 2, 3 blocks, I think. So the reason I have them is because they're heavy, and it'll help me fix the unevenness on my cut lines without actually compromising the, if the walls are actually straight up and down or not. Because I know that where I put the texture, that's the flat surface of the foam, so I know that that's flat. So as long as I have those little 1, 2, 3 blocks up, that will actually, help support everything without me messing it up. Again, this is after me doing many rooms and finding some of the errors in my ways. So this is my wash. I think instead of painting this gray, I ended up just doing it the long version. So in this case, I use glossy. What is this stuff again? It's a gloss medium. That's what it is. I just have it laying around. That's why I used it. And then that was, you could use dishwashing liquid or, to make wet water, and then a bunch of water with a little bit of color. Now, the color is not black. The color is pavement that I'm using. I did not want to make it 100% black, but I wanted to make it very, very watery because this paint that I put on there is very, 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 it dries very, chalky. And so it soaks up paint a lot. So that's why I used the gloss medium, so that way it'll create a bond on it. Now you can also obviously do this with Mod Podge or whatever you wanted to do, but this is what I use. So this is me doing it, I think, for 2 or 3 different wipes. Now the great part about the gloss is that it will not, see, you can see all the streaks, but when it dries, it actually kind of puddles. It'll come together and puddle and create a lot of the extra depth and texture for you automatically. So, that's the nice thing about that. So this is actually me doing another lid. Obviously, I wanted to speed this up quite a bit because it just wasn't necessary to, it's a pretty simple process, but I also wanted to show the whole lid size itself because I thought it was important to do. So this is me spending a little less time trying to draw lines down the whole thing and only on the parts where I have to cut. And so this is where I'm using the template just as an alternative to just cutting them out by hand, without any kind of guideline. And again, this would be a lot easier if it were a wire cutter. And you're always going to cut out the corners of the foam of the lids. You will never use the corners on the lids. So this is, it's foam, black core foam core. I think it's a 1/8. I don't think it's exactly 3/16, but whatever it is. Now this is the base for everything. So whatever you do, whatever you pick, which I recommend black so that way you don't have to deal with it. But you want to make sure it's the same size for every single one of your rooms, because otherwise they'll be a little taller or a little shorter, and you don't want that. And here in a minute I will show you why I do this for everything. But what I do is I just basically cut out the basic shape, and then I hot glue it down, and then I go back and then I precision cut it. So this way I don't actually cut it too short or whatever. It's also for just in case you when you're cutting the floors up and to connect them together, you might want them to be a little tighter. So doing this foam core like this, you can actually make it just a little bit wider so it has a more snug fit. For the corners, you can I just use some extra pieces of foam. So you can do anything you want to with them. You can make them look like the wall. But one of the things that I like is to add a texture to them. Oh, I'm doing that now. Okay, so I'm adding a texture to them because I'm going to paint them to look like wood. So this way it kind of feels like, just adds a little bit extra, artsy kind of flair to it. I also don't like making them the full size where they fill it in because it just it doesn't really feel right. If there were real wood supports on these dungeons rooms, they probably would not be the thickness of the walls. So they'll probably be a little thinner. You want to make them all the height of the peaks on the walls. Don't make them the height of the valleys because it will mess with your lid a little bit. This is the one that I prefer. It's the same concept. It's the same process of about everything, but it is, I think, 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch. So this is just enough to really give it that extra little oomph, I think. And I say, because now you can see I hot glued the big piece to the room, and you can see it over on the left, and it just doesn't look good. I don't like with the walls and everything being the same, having the same flushness or whatever. It just doesn't look right to me, and I think that this small one ended up actually doing everything it needed to do. Okay, so the reason that I have the foam core on the bottom the way I do is so that way from the outside you can remove the floor from the walls without actually having it there. So the room will still look like a room, but you can actually do a lot of stuff with it, right? So you can have it to where it goes like a descending staircase or ascending staircase. Like where there's a lake, or it drifts off into the to where there's a body of water, or where there are like these tiles just kind of suspended in the void that you have to get around, and maybe it's a trap room or maybe it's a pendulum. It could be anything really, but the idea is by not having that floor, you can actually add to the possibilities by, you gain that extra 9/16 of an inch to kind of play around with. And this way, you can, as I say, you could put a door there on the room and then have the blocks kind of sitting it up. As I say, the sky's the limit, but the idea is that you're not, after you trim it all up, you're not going to know what this room is on the outside because it's going to look like all the rest of them. So, that's the reason that I do the foam core bottoms that I do. And I should have painted these all gray for the illustration purposes, but as I say, couldn't help it. Now see how the color pulls up into like little pockets and such like that? I think it actually looks great. You can go back and touch it up a little bit, and create some more. But as I say, that's like a 2-minute paint job. So it's it's not my best work, but it got the point across, I think. I hope. So anyway, that is what I have right now. So I hope that it's useful for everybody. I hope that it actually gives everyone the ability to kind of expand the horizons in what they can do. And as I say, I will make all of this stuff available for free on my Patreon. And then as I go along, I'll create some new rooms and some new designs based on the basics that I have here, because I have quite a few different ideas. I just wanted to kind of get this core element done and out there first, and then we go from there. But again, please like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. Go to my Patreon, download that file, and as I say, while you're there, maybe stick around a little bit and become a patron. And thanks for watching.